weird finding it from.
Huh.
And that's what Carmelo just brought up.
You mean it wasn't in the folder, or did I just actually forget to put the link on the email?
It was in the folder, but it wasn't in the where you usually have it. You make it so easy for us where it's linked to the where it says meeting agenda or pieces here, and it's hyperlinked to the thing, and then it's like linked to the meeting, the Google Meet there too. So
my apologies. I'll make sure that I could do that better. But if it's ever not on the email, you can always find the agenda online on the NAB's website.
I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. And we are live.
Okay. Great. Let me just where is the chat?
And members of the public that are listening in, we're just dropping a link to the agenda in the chat. This link can be found online on the Noise Advisory Board's website.
Okay, but I'm not finding the chat. It's not down on the bottom for me right now.
Oh, that is weird. Well, I can pull up the agenda and get you guys a link. No worries. I'll do that.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and start. So this meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the February 13th Asheville Noise Advisory Board meeting. My name is Jessica Thomason. I am the chair of the Noise Advisory Board. I will introduce each agenda item and facilitate the meeting to help our audience follow along. All committee members and staff are participating virtually today. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the first page of the city website and also linked on the Noise Advisory Board page. For those of you with us today out there, welcome. I will now go through and introduce all the board members who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you are not speaking, and when you have a question or would like to speak, please unmute your microphone. Board members, as I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. So, Reb Haslib.
Present.
Liliana Woody.
Present. Sorry.
All good. Carmelo Pampolonio.
Present.
Jeff Santiago.
Present.
David Ledger. David is not present, and Rick Freeman is not here. We knew he was not going to be here today. Also with us is Council Liaison, Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley. Okay. Councilwoman Mosley is not present. And also joining us as Noise Administrator, Todd Justice.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so first, this meeting is called to order. First order of business is the approval of minutes from the January meeting. There's a link to the meeting minutes in the agenda for today. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes for January meeting?
I can make a motion to approve January minutes.
I'll second.
Jeff motions to approve, and I heard a second from...
Seconds.
Who is that?
Reb.
From Reb? Okay, thanks. Sorry, I need to turn my audio up. It was a little too low. Okay, we have a motion to approve in a second. Carmelo Pampolonio, how would you like to vote for approving the minutes?
I approve.
Great. And Liliana Woody?
Approve.
Great. And I approve. And so that is, the minutes are approved for our January meeting. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on. Noise Administrator check-in. So there's a link in the agenda for everyone to look at what that looks like. So now the interesting thing is that if you click on the link, the numbers are there for January. but they're not there for February. However, if you go to the noise dashboard, oh, Haley.
You got it. You were going.
Okay. So that's basically what you were just about to offer. Okay. Yeah, great. So if you click on the link that is in the agenda under staff report, it'll show you just the January numbers. We have it pulled up. We're looking at it. However, at the bottom of the page, if you want to go to the noise complaint dashboard, it actually has the numbers up for February as well. Also, that document now with the noise complaint dashboard shows you the numbers from corresponding by year and by the complaint received by source and the type of complaint. So it also gives you in the dashboard, we also see the, if you continue to scroll down, you'll see the status of the complaint, which also has the complaint code on it. And I just have to say that's really, really helpful. So thank you for that, because when it was on another piece of the information, it just made it so much easier to be able to start to recognize and realize what those codes actually mean. So, but yeah, so if you want to take a look at that, Todd has a hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to everyone that we're trying to get all of the majority of the complaints that come into the city onto Asheville app, unless they do direct contact with us through email or phone. And so we've done that with noise starting on February 1st. And so you will not see jot form on the spreadsheet for the month of February. Everything will be, if it comes in to the city digitally, it's going to come from Asheville app going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay. So yeah, so now everyone has a chance to take a look at it. If there's any questions or things questions, comments. I see that there's a grading in color based on the amount of complaints or information happening. Thanks for including the media, by the way, of the humor of 10 most wanted noise ordinance offenders.
That was a fun little article.
Yeah, I didn't see it till I read this. Is there any questions or comments about this, the staff report?
I'm still trying to digest a lot of it, especially in comparison from year to year. I think it'll take a little while to kind of absorb the differences, or I don't want to use any words like improvements or anything like that, but just the differences. And I'm curious about things like, sorry, let me pull it up real fast. Where complainants call it off, I guess. I'm just curious what type of citation or what type of complaints they were to begin with that they called off themselves.
Where are you seeing? Are you looking under? Is that the status of complaint, like a complaint code?
Yes, it's one of the complaint codes. I'm trying to find it here.
So often those are the person didn't really understand that what they were talking about was a noise complaint or not a noise complaint.
Gotcha.
Or sometimes Daniel will get a complaint that probably should have went to APD from a criminal
gotcha
aspect, and so it might fall into that category as well.
Okay, that's just a quick one. I was popping out at me.
Right.
Thank you.
Todd, I have a question. When we see that it says complaint resolved, that's just from the DSD office, right? That doesn't have to do with APD, or is that both?
No, so yeah, any complaint that comes through APD is going to get handled by Daniel and DSD. So
Okay.
The resolved ones are the ones that he was able to make contact with the complainant, make contact with the violator if there was one, and essentially, close out the case. He feels like he resolved the issue that was going on there.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. All right. Well, let's move on then to old business. And the first thing that we have is the working group updates, decibel levels. Jeff, is there any other updates that you have for us? I know there was a discussion about getting with city staff, getting with DSD, and going to some of the complainants' houses from the survey. Is that where do things stand with that?
It's still in the same spot, so I don't know if Rick had made any headway with that, or I don't know if Todd could speak to that at all. But basically, we're still in that same spot, just trying to get some more survey information and work that out with city staff how to actually do that. So it's kind of where we're at. So it's kind of the same place.
Okay. Okay. What about vehicle noise? Rev, have you has anything changed or been updated?
Actually, I guess I wonder what happens now that the recommendation has gone to the council. I saw that it was listed in the commission and board's recommendations 5 times, no less. It must have been important. And so I thought that we would get some indication from council through city manager to us that would either authorize or not authorize us to proceed with what we asked. So, and I haven't heard anything in that regard.
Okay. Yeah. And so, which brings us to the next old business, which is the annual report. So as you know, is like so we turned that in. And what Reb's talking about is that they basically compiled all of the recommendations from every committee into one document, and it's been sent to the committee for let's see, Haley's going to pull it up. So well, there's our annual report. So but basically all of the committees that have had recommendations for right now has been all compiled into one document that I know they're meeting tomorrow. And what I saw in the email that went out to the chairs was that it was I believe for discussion only, that nothing's going to be voted on in terms of the things that they're making, that we've all made recommendations for. So yeah. So I was hoping Councilwoman Mosley would be here just to give us a little bit more information on sort of what's next for that, because I am unfamiliar with how things proceed once they have a discussion about them tomorrow. Todd has his hand raised.
So I would suspect that they're not going to make a vote or approval or anything just on what you have put into this document. My guess would be that the next step, if they want to pursue this, would be to have either members of the board to come in and speak to them about what exactly it is you're proposing and what that might look like, and the thought that you've put into that and so forth. Or they might ask me or Daniel to come in and do it. But I think that that's the next step. I don't think that they're just going to give you a green light and say, hey, take off running or whatever. But I think they're going to want, if they decide that this is something that they want to pursue, the next step is they're going to be wanting to collect more information and data about it from the board.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thanks, Todd. That's helpful. So yeah, so I guess we're in this wait and see if we get called to the table for more, to provide more information. So hopefully that'll happen. Okay, so moving on to on old business to look at potential working groups. So just following back up with some of the things that some of the potential opportunities of places to work, of things to work on for improvement that DSD could possibly use support in. Two of the things that we talked about from the annual retreat was the public space issue and the commercial, industrial, abutting residential areas. So those are two things that we know that we've seen has been challenging. I know that it's kind of, I know part of, how do I put this? Noise is a little seasonal, right? We know that. So we're not seeing as much of the activity as we normally do as things tend to warm up a little bit. But I wanted to bring this up for a discussion to look at some of these things and see if there's anybody who's interested in exploring these and just maybe in some potentially gathering data sort of thing in terms of like what other places are doing in terms of how they handle noise in public space or in places that are commercial, industrial, abutting residential areas.
I probably have the most background on the adjacent area issue. It's one of the most vexing problems in the whole noise ordinance, and certainly was as it was authored over the last several years. And it finally just got kicked down the road because it's really difficult problem to solve. So, I mean, I'd be happy to look at it and take it on. I've done a lot of research in what other jurisdictions have done and how we got to where we are now. So I don't know if there's a timetable to that task force research, but
there's not necessarily.
I mean, Rick and I probably know as much about it as anybody.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I there's not necessarily a timetable. I think just, what I'm thinking about with these two things, and I'm happy to take on the public space one because I'm really interested in that. I recently just got a call from somebody in Washington, D.C. about that. So, I'm just curious to see how other places deal with that. And that's what I'm thinking is like, if we started from a component of just like looking at maybe doing some research and starting there, and then that sort of gives us a little bit of a headway and head start into as things start to, warm up, people are moving outdoors and doing things, gives us a little bit more sort of a head, like I said, a head start to addressing some of these things. But yeah, I know that you're already spearheading vehicle noise. And also I want to make sure everybody wants to be a part of some of these working groups. And if not that, we're going to talk a little bit more of other focus areas or areas of improvement that people do want to focus on. So, but yeah, I'd love to see everybody get involved with joining some of these working groups. So Reb, that you're not doing, for instance, all the work of both vehicle noise and commercial, industrial, abutting residential. But it's great to have your experience because you are, like you said, probably one of the most experienced with that.
It's not that much work, and most of the research is done.
Okay, that'd be great. Does anybody want to work with Reb on that? Liliana? Okay, great. So that would be great. Does anybody want to work with
a trove of documents?
Yeah, I'm super curious to see it. It's just interesting. It's like, with a lot of these issues that we're looking at, clearly we're not the first to deal with these things, right? And people deal with this all over the country, all over the world, really. So part of it for me is like the coming from a place of curiosity of just how have people dealt with this in the past and who's doing it well and who's not. Right. Sometimes we can learn as much from those places as we can from the people doing it well.
Well, I'll just prepare you for the bottom line, and it's political will.
Political will?
Yeah. Got to be political will to do something about it.
Yeah.
Because this fight has been fought.
Yeah. Understandable. Yeah. Especially, are you speaking specifically to the Mission Hospital?
Well, no, I'm not. I mean, that's where my experience comes from. And that's why I was one of the leaders in the effort to look most closely at noise adjacencies. And I mean, I don't know how many of you ever saw the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhood ordinance that was drafted, that some parts of which became law, others didn't. But that was probably the most difficult part to figure out.
Yeah.
For a lot of different reasons, and we don't have to go into that now, but we made a lot of recommendations for ways to deal with it, and they just didn't make it through.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I look forward to learning more about that. Does anybody want to work with me on public space? Jeff?
Can you talk a little bit more about that first?
Yeah. So, one of the things, that's, you have, there's a number of different things. And so part of that is the subjectivity of the content. That's, everything from, and then also protecting free speech, which is one of those things that definitely becomes a very sticky, tricky area. And so this is one of the conversations I was having from this organization in DC is do you decipher, what do you do with street preachers versus buskers versus, people out with pamphlets and just everything sort of in between. And so how do you deal with that in public space? And what's a matter of infringing on, free speech versus what's I just don't like this content that's here. So that's what I'm going to complain about. And also just especially when it comes to where do you measure when somebody is, for instance, is right outside of busking or is right in front of Bomba's Coffee, right? I think that's what it's called now. The place that's on the corner right there by Pack Square. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's one of those really touchy areas because you get buskers that are out there doing all sorts of things, but you also get, on the flip side, you get the people that are out there, the street preachers that are, some people just don't like that content. And so, yeah, so that's kind of just looking how other cities approach it. And if there's different regulations for different things.
Don't you think they should both be treated the same as far as noise and disturbance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's the question, right? Is what's subjective to, I mean, should it be, I mean, of course things should be held to a decibel level, right? Is part of it. But I think part of the challenge is that people may be in compliance, but it's a habitual problem.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think this is a really interesting question, of course, and like you said, it's super touchy, and there's going to be some fine lines and gray areas, and that's why it's kind of important. But genuinely asking, as far as directing our time and energy toward this question of public space, how much of a priority would you want to give that as a working group project? Because I'm just looking at the noise complaint dashboard. And it says there was one public space complaint for January. There were more, of course, in what looks like 2022. There was 19 in June of 2022, and then it kind of tapered off after there. So of course things are more happening outside in public spaces during the summer months. Mm-hmm. But No, I'm just curious what prompted you to want to take this up, like genuinely asking.
So so correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, but part of it was because this was a challenge that they were dealing with, right? So kind of what we talked about, if you remember from the annual retreat, was looking at some of the things, where we were going to focus is where are things that have been challenges for DSD that we could perhaps step in as the noise advisory board and help provide some further direction or information or content and that sort of thing. So Todd, can you speak to some of the challenges that with the public space to see if it's something, just as it pertains to challenges that you've been facing?
Sure. So the biggest problem that we have with public space is the ordinance is kind of vague as to what constitutes a noise nuisance or nuisance noise. And so we have been able to manage the buskers fairly easily because they are fairly compliant with our requests and they don't want to ruin their opportunities there in the downtown area and other parts of town. So they are very willing to go along. However, we have honestly mostly protest groups and other people who want to speak their mind in a public space, and controlling their amplification and where they cross the line into noise nuisance has been challenging for us. It's also difficult for us to enforce that on the spot, and because there is some what is public space and what does that mean? That is fairly open to interpretation. And I'm not sure if you folks are aware of this, but the group that filed a lawsuit against the city for their ability to protest in front of Planned Parenthood and have amplified noise and that sort of thing when they're doing that, the judge who was reviewing that case during the preliminary series of hearings essentially put a stay on the city's ability to enforce the ordinance there around Planned Parenthood because he felt like the city had not done a good enough job of defining what public space was and what amplification was and those sorts of things. So, I mean, those are just the preliminary hearings, of what's probably going to be a very long court case. But these are some of the things that we're going to, that we were kind of asking to try to get more clarification on. And that, obviously at this point, my recommendation would be don't go too far down the rabbit hole with that until we hear what the court has to say when they finally come around and decide the case and all that other stuff, because that will obviously have a huge impact on what we can do. But that is one of the key things that they had pointed out, that the court pointed out, was that they didn't feel like we had done a very good job of defining some of these key terms that we have in the ordinance.
Gotcha. Thank you, Todd. That's very helpful. Yeah. And do you know when that next court date is for that case?
I do not know.
Okay. I'll see what
we can find that out and try to send something out to the board members.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Jeff, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I have a question for Todd. I would imagine it's complicated at times that you might be handling a complaint in those scenarios where we're not sure if the complaint is about the actual noise or if it's about the content or what the people are protesting.
Sure, and that's when we, as particularly Daniel, has to go out and make an assessment of, is it nuisance noise? Is this a legitimate complaint, or is it just someone who's, has a problem with the person who's generating the noise? And it basically comes down to officer discretion as to whether the complaint whether the complaint actually turns into a violation or not. The majority of the complaints he gets do not turn into violations because he's making a call about, and all of those violations, anytime that we have a violation, we are basically trying to answer the question, if we pursue this, are we going to be able to defend it in court?
Right.
And so if there's any question at all about whether, like we've struggled with third-party evidence. Sometimes people will send us videos of somebody downtown who's creating what they consider to be a nuisance, and so they complain and they send us video. We've had to kind of let some of those cases go because it's third-party evidence. It's not something that the officer collected, and so we're very aware and very cognizant of, if we're going to pursue this case, it's going to have to be something we can defend in court. And obviously, given the Planned Parenthood issues and the lawsuit that we're having, it's a legitimate concern that we have to keep in mind.
Absolutely. I also think that's something as a board that we need to keep in mind as we evaluate complaints and things that are, compliant versus non-compliant. Because complaints are still going to be complaints and registered. So we need to kind of keep an eye on that.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Todd. Any other questions?
You.
So Carmelo, does that answer give you some more background in terms of why I was looking at that as a potential working group, which sounds like, from what Todd says, that maybe we hold off for that right now and just until we at least know when that other court date is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The call that Todd said. I mean, we're not going to, that's in progress, that case. So it seems like a sticky issue, and also we're kind of powerless until that decision is made at that point. But I do agree, and also it is interesting to know, like Todd said, that the judge deemed that the term or classification of a public nuisance wasn't clearly enough defined. So that shows that, I guess it should be on our radar, and it is good to kind of have a preemptive step up before the warmer months, because obviously, the numbers for public complaints, public space complaints are low right now, but, they will go up. And looking at 2022, if that's any indication of a trend, it's, of course, the number one complaints in the summer months or any month is residential neighbor, but public space was third most common type of complaints, noise complaint. It was residential neighbors were number one, business operations were two, and then it was public space. So it is up there. And I guess the sooner we kind of put that on our radar collectively, the better. Yeah.
Reb?
I was just going to suggest that you get in touch with the leadership of DARN. I think that's Downtown Area Residents.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were the most vocal stakeholder in the noise ordinance development process. And that was one of their primary concerns, along with some outdoor entertainment venues, but they would have a lot to say about it.
Okay. Yeah. And Haley, can I ask a question for clarification? So is it only when we do the annual report, is that the only time that we can go to council with recommendations for changes?
No, not at all. So your council liaison is your most direct route to getting recommendations to council. So Antoinette would be able to give us the best guidance on how to package recommendations for her to bring up to the others.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking that is was just thinking if that was the only way, is that we had to wait until December of 2023, right? Mm-hmm. Just thinking about, time and energy and that sort of thing. But But that's good to know. So, well, okay, great. And thanks for that, Reb. So Darn would definitely, yeah, because I'm sure they're the ones dealing with it more than anybody other than the people around Planned Parenthood. So, which I remember them specifically definitely being at the meetings, at the council meetings when we were talking about noise ordinance things. So, okay, great. Any other questions on that before we move on to new business? No, okay. So the first thing we have here is noise trends by year. So that mainly, I have not spent enough time with the complaint dashboard to have a conversation necessarily on that other than what I'm looking at right now. But, and I'm willing to bet most of us on here haven't had the opportunity to do that. But it would be interesting for us to look at some of the trends that have happened over the last year. Thank you, Haley. You're so good. Look at some of the trends over the last year to see how things have changed. I do want to make a note in regards to the fact that we have been asking people to make complaints with having the various ways to be able to make complaints. So just keep that in mind, is that it's definitely something we're trying to address and make sure people know it's accessible in order to make complaints. So we're definitely going to see an increase in numbers, as we should be, once from the end of 2022, or from the end of 2021, I'm sorry. So yeah, because if you scroll all the way over, you can see what Haley has up here. And so, yeah, any comments on that as of right now?
No, I think it's extremely well organized and it's really helpful. The only thing that my brain is telling me that would make it perfect is if I could look at it as a proportion to population or proportion to how many individuals or families are in multifamily complexes, because we can see maybe some of the numbers go up, some of the numbers go down, and it's super helpful to know the timing of that, and also like whether things are seasonal, like the public noise violations, for example. But the proportional part will be super interesting to know, and I think would provide a lot of clarification. But I'm not saying that we need to, overhaul or add that completely new dimension and, guesstimate things and put more on the workload for Todd and the team. But that's where my mind goes, and I'm always just trying to keep that in mind. I sound like a broken record, always talking about it as a proportion of population, but that's where I'm always at.
No, I think that's a good point. And we brought that up, and just so we put this in the annual report because it was an accomplishment of the work from the noise administrator's office that there's 64 apartment complexes and 11,043 units in the city. So we do have that information in regards to that. I don't think that that's going to fluctuate that much in terms of growth. Yes, it will change as more complexes are coming in, but I definitely think it's important to keep that in mind, because then that allows us to see, it's 1% of the total number of housing that we have in multifamily units. Same thing, I do agree with the population, and I know we've mentioned that a couple times, that which would probably be really easy for us just to pull that information and just give it to Haley or Daniel to put in there, just like population of Asheville 2021, 2022, 2023. So, because I do think it's important to look at those numbers. If we're seeing noise complaints go up, but our population's not going up, so there's not that tie to it, then that's something we obviously need to really be paying attention to, is like, so what's not going right if we're getting more complaints with the same amount of people and population? Other questions or comments about the any trends you see I think it is something we should just do for some homework too, is just everybody take a look at it and see if there's some aha moments that you happen to see. Total number of complaints, 1613 for 2022. Interesting. Okay, no other questions on that. All right, so any other ideas in terms of focus or things to improve on in terms of for noise ordinance that we haven't already discussed today?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be possible for Haley to post the World Health Organization guidelines for community noise in our docs file. It's a worthy read. I think that the statistics and measures of complaints are interesting, but most people just bear with it. And you really, I mean, it's not a true picture of the effect of noise in communities by the complaint panel. I just think it'd be worth reading what the real effect of noise is and what maybe the underlying purpose of this committee could be. And I've got copies of it, Haley. You may as well, but I just think it'd be worth, if you haven't read it, just read it. It's kind of a slog, pretty long document, but it's well worth the read. And I just put that out there.
Yeah, Reb, if you'd like to send me a link, I'll be happy to push it out to the board members.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to take a look at it.
It really puts everything into some perspective.
And you know, it's so, when you say that, are you talking mainly about, does this, because this is what I want to read, I'm super curious, is it mainly about decibel levels in terms of like how high the decibel level is and the length of time of how over a period of time in terms of like detrimental to health? Like, my question is, because noise, because it's subjective, right? So something that I think is enjoyable to me might be completely unenjoyable to like Liliana, right? So I'm wondering about like if it talks about the psychological effects, because we might be listening to some, like there's the whole, yes, like damaging like the ear, you know, the eardrum and the ear canal and that sort of thing. There's the actual physical part of it, but does it address the psychological part of it of, you know, some things wouldn't bother me at all in that way, but they might bother someone else? All
of the above. So
it has that info in there?
It's a comprehensive document on the public health threat of noise, both psychological as well as physiological. And it's also fairly specific in terms of acceptable decibel levels. It comes at it from a place where we don't, and that is that in the absence of rest and repose, which is what really suffers the most in the presence of noise disturbance, people develop chronic health problems.
Yeah.
As you might suspect, those people who have always suffered the most from environmental pollution suffer the worst from noise. But it's not exclusive to a single group. So it really does delve into everything you just discussed.
Okay, great.
Which is why it's such a long slog. But for a group of people who are looking at the impact of noise in their community, it's almost required reading, I would think.
Okay, great. I look forward to checking it out. I am no stranger to slogging through things.
You'd have to be a glutton for slogging to be on this committee, I think.
I kind of feel that way, Reb. I have to agree with you. I mean, it's just like, I mean, this is no discredit to any other organization, but there's a difference between like, we need more trees. Here's how many trees are in Asheville. Here's how, you know what I mean? There's like, that's very like, okay, this is cut and dry in terms of like, we know how many trees there are. We know how many we want. Let's see how we figure that out. To this, you know, noise is such.
Right.
So yeah, we are a little glutton for punishment. So I appreciate all, you know, being here with all of you, trying to figure it out, you know. So any other ideas or focus areas or anything like that we want to take a look at? And again, it doesn't necessarily like this could be some old business for next time. Maybe if you know, speaking about being glutton for punishment, going through the noise ordinance again, seeing what other parts, you know, that we haven't put a focus on that might want to see if there's things that we can help with. I also defer to like DSD to see if there's, you know, because one of the things I look to, I hope that we can do is for the noise advisory board like this is like help with the things that are issues for them, where they're continuing to see things come up that we can provide support in, because they're ultimately the ones that have to enforce this. And so if they're having problems with that, that's where we can hopefully step in, i.e. the public space and those definitions. So
clarification question for just going back to how we received a few personal notes about, or messages about some of the music and other various things. Like some people were talking about vehicle noise. There was the lawyer downtown and everything. And I know, Reb, you've been tackling the vehicle noise quite well on your end, but for the classification of stuff on the noise complaint dashboard. Does like the music venue stuff fall under outdoor events, just out of curiosity? Well,
So-
maybe for Rabbit or Salvage Station.
Yeah, so for outdoor events, we're looking at specifically permitted outdoor events. So like they got a special event permit to have an event outdoor. So that would be like your downtown after 5 or some of the events that we have in Pack Square. Looking at music venues, we're looking at business operations. If that's your standard operations and what you're doing on a usual, we're going the business operations route.
Okay, and vehicle/music, is that music coming from vehicles?
Yes,
Okay.
we had the one, originally we just had the category for vehicle noise, and we noticed that the complaints were coming from like 2 different buckets, which were like the noise from a vehicle itself and then music being played from a vehicle.
Yeah. Thank you. It's an interesting and good distinction.
Jeff, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, Haley, I understand that for some of the outdoor venues, they are still required to get permits. So does that still fall under the permanent outdoor event thing, or is that a business?
Yeah, so if you're talking
Operation.
about a sound exceedance permit,
Yeah.
those those usually are in conjunction with a special use permit, but not always. So for example, if we're looking at Rabbit, they're going to have a sound exceedance permit, but they are an outdoor music venue. It's just they're inherently outdoor, but that is their business operations. So we're counting that as their business operations. Whereas something like, I'm trying to think of a different example.
You said downtown after 5.
Yeah, downtown after
That
5.
makes sense,
That's
yeah.
more like a city thing. So like more for if you wanted like a private example, we did at one time, Sly Grog had a sound exceedance permit, and they also had a special event permit that kind of went hand in hand, and that we would have counted it as outdoor events more so than business operations, because they're not an outdoor music venue.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification.
Todd, you want to add something?
Yeah, this could go, I suppose, in the good news column. We have already started seeing venues and businesses reach out to us about upcoming events this summer, and starting to talk to us about noise exceedance permits and, who's responsible for what when it comes to public events in Pack Square and stuff like that. So there's definitely a heightened awareness that the city is tracking these sort of things, and the people that are organizing these events are coming forward and, trying to anticipate that they may need to come to some sort of agreement with us or whatever. So that's a good sign that we're starting to make an impact here in the city.
Okay, great. And it seems like most of the things that are classified as outdoor events seem to happen on city property. Is that a fair classification, Haley?
I would say so far, yes. So far, the examples have been, yeah. There might come a time where, like, the Grove Park-In applies for maybe a special event for like a huge wedding or something, and that would fall under outdoor event. But
okay, gotcha. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments on open discussion for areas to improve on or focus? All right, moving on. So March meeting. So I am not available to be at the March meeting, and I know neither is Rick Freeman. So that's already two of us that are not going to be available. So wanted to discuss tabling the March meeting until April and see how everybody felt about that. Is that something we would vote on, Haley?
To cancel the meeting, yes, we would. A motion would be appropriate.
Okay. So first, I'll just open it up for discussion. What are everyone's thoughts in terms of any questions or concerns if we did not have a March meeting?
You and who else would not be able to make it? Sorry.
Rick and I cannot make it for the March meeting.
I see.
I'm okay with it. Tabling it.
Okay, so can I get a motion to not have the March meeting for the Noise Advisory Board?
I'll give a motion to skip the March meeting.
Can I get a second for that motion? Okay, Liliana seconded.
Second, yeah.
Reb,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yep.
Yes.
yay, and yay for me too. So motion approved to skip the March meeting and pick up in April. And now we'll go to Haley to see if we have any public comment.
Let me just refresh the page real quick to make sure nobody's snuck in. We do not have any callers on the line for public comment today.
Okay, great. So if there are no objections, we will adjourn this meeting. Are there any objections to adjourning this meeting? All right, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. And that means our next meeting will be on, maybe not be on April 10th, which is Easter Monday. I don't know if that matters.
I'll have to see what the city has going on for the holidays. Sometimes we get the Friday and sometimes we get the Monday, but it's usually Easter Friday that we get. So I think we'll be open and operating.
Okay.
But I'll double check with everybody and let you know well in advance. But I think April 10th will be it.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. It's good seeing everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.